So let's just get right into it. Give me a quick brief about yourself, your upbringing, how you got into crypto, and kind of what you're building right now.
Sure. So I'm based out of India. I started after I finished high school, I moved and I studied CS at a university called San State. And during that time, I really wanted to pursue a PhD in crypto economics. And so in my about sophomore year, I applied for research assistantship with almost every professor in the CS department. And one of the professors got back to me and we started working on Ethereum. And that's sort of how I got accustomed to the space and got to learn more about it. So I started doing research and we worked on something called Token Reward Protocol, which was later adapted by a company called Zero Chain, and we presented it at ICNC 2019 and CES. And we worked on a few other protocols and mining pool security. Then as we progressed further, I really wanted to work on consensus protocols. So we messed around with that for a little bit and sort of for fun, just created our own. And as we moved forward, after I graduated, I worked again for Zero Chain. I was one of their early hires and they were sort of building a decentralized AWS. I worked briefly with them and a company called Luxo, which is working on digital fashion and tokenizing them. And they had a really interesting concept called the reversible ICO. And at the time, ICOs were known as much as a scam, and I really wanted to work on making them better. So I got to work with Fabian Vogelsteller and got to learn about how he created the ERC20 token standard and what they were trying to build for consumer and social. That's sort of where I got the inspiration for working in this space. And I think at the time, Roll and Rally were two platforms that were really deep involved in social tokens. But my idea was that if I want to build crypto and scale it to the next billion people, I wanted to build a social network. And the main reason for that is even after the quarantine, if you see the barrier to entry to create on the internet is starting to get lower and lower every year. And I think we're only getting more lazier and just trying to be more on the internet than do more conventional jobs. So keeping that in mind, I think it's important that we migrate those people and give them an avenue for at least creators on the internet. I think the definition gets looser and looser, but just building a platform for them and see how crypto can be beneficial for them. And that's sort of the grain of thought we started building Coinvise with in about November 2020. We started out as more we're all hackers and developers. So we were about 4 people and we shipped out an initial version where anybody could create a token. It was all for free. Even today it's for free. And you could airdrop it to anyone on social media, on just any platform really. At the time, the idea was that we want to make interactions so simple that even grandma in Iowa could do it really simply and create a token. So that was fun, and in about 2 weeks, we shipped it out. Today, the idea is that we're trying to look more like a decentralized Reddit for communities and creators. And the train of thought is the same, that we want to build these communities with aligned incentives, and tokens are a great way to start that. And I think tokens and even NFTs are some concepts that are easily digestible when you're working with social networks. So that's how we're starting out, and eventually we'll branch into DAOs and creator DAOs, which we can talk about later. But that's sort of Coinvise today, and we're operating today on Ethereum and Polygon. So
yeah, and so like you said, the barrier to entry to become a creator is very low. People on TikTok are becoming influencers and gaining hundreds of thousands to millions of followers really, really quick, right? All the attention is slowly shifting over there for millennials and Gen Z. But what is it about creators that prompted you to go into this? Because it's a very unique problem to get into, right? There's DeFi, there's DAOs, there's all these different moving parts within crypto. Why creators?
Right. So I think creators are probably one of the more people that have adopted technology as a form of work. And the whole idea there was when you date back to Instagram or YouTube, having those microtransactions when you're doing a live stream or something, the idea there was that how about we merge work and social together, right? And the idea that fascinated me was our definition of what a creator is maybe limited to someone doing streams on YouTube or being an influencer on one of these Instagram or TikTok platforms, but it's much more than that. If you have a bit of community, if you have a set of people that share the same idea as you, and if you're continuously creating value for them, I think that's when you could also be labeled as a creator. And I think at some point everybody's going to be a creator. We just don't see that as it yet, but I think those are the people that are much more willing to adopt crypto and trying to navigate ways to like monetizing and finding new ways to like level up every single time. So I think that was like the community that I really wanted to work with. So
Yeah.
creators.
Yeah, a lot of people that get into crypto early on, you're referencing how you kind of got started in college, working all these different projects, trying to get involved. I too also started in school, and I think it's a lot of people shit on going to school, but I think it's a
Yeah,
lot of where early ideas get spread and experimentation gets done on a very intimate level with other students.
yeah,
And I think you guys come at a unique time where we are seeing these new social platforms come in and about, and people are, like I said, becoming influencers left and right, building their own communities, but they primarily live on these Web 2.5 platforms, right? A lot of influencers, they're building their audience across Instagram, TikTok, Snapchat, all these platforms. But
mhm.
how do you monetize them, right? And I guess that's where kind of like
Right.
Coinvise comes into the picture, creating and tokenizing communities. So tell me more about Coinvise, the vision behind that. How did that idea kind of come about? Uh,
Right.
and where are you seeing the market that prompted that type of birth right now?
Sure. So I'll probably give an example, like my one personal example that I got really fascinated by was like I'll take back to college when I used to like, believe it or not, I used to pay my bills like rent and food through Gitcoin, and Gitcoin like
Really?
just as a developer, I enjoyed Gitcoin because you could just write code, solve issues, or do any kind of work there that like fits your skill set. You can just browse through like an infinite scroll of like all these issues or things that fit your palette, and then you work on them on GitHub. You put your code, someone verifies it, and you get paid directly in your MetaMask. And I survived through college through that. So I think that was like the idea there was like, what if we could bring that experience to like creators, and we could create it like a social platform where monetization could look like that, where funds are instantly in your MetaMask. So the idea there was that we don't want to just build tools, but we want to create an experience around that where we can make those interactions simple, and monetizing shouldn't be as difficult. And really, like when you look at Web2 platforms, they take huge cuts. Like how do we eliminate that and keep it like a transparent process between them and their community? So I think that was something exciting, but even more so than monetizing, like how do you keep these followers or like your community long term and align them long term? How do you keep them consistently contributing value long term? So I think those are problems that were very interesting for me to solve, and I think Gitcoin was one of the earliest examples that did add that value to me. So Coinvise, I mean, the idea there was that we want to make those interactions once a token is minted. Let's say, Adam, you have an idea and you create a DAO and you create a token around it. How do you interact around those tokens? How do you create, let's say, a reward where your community can earn by contributing some value, and you can in turn get some more coordination and engagement for your own, like, and grow it over time. So I think those interactions are really like something that I look for.
So let's talk more about these interactions, because when people are talking about utility, it's really based off those level of interactions, right? From what I'm understanding. So
Right.
when you're talking about creating value, starting a DAO, a decentralized autonomous organization for a problem that someone's trying to solve, a community, whatever it may be, how do you guys empower creators with utility, with developing at least more utility?
Right. So there's two aspects of it. I think more short term, if you look at it, there's this sort of loyalty points approach where a lot of these utility are earning and spending, right? And we've seen like plenty of use cases there and plenty of platforms building great products around that sort of use case. And the second approach is sort of ownership. And the whole idea of crypto, like in my head, when I started out, my professor always used to tell me that crypto isn't about money, it's about decentralizing power. How do you decentralize power from one entity to like many people? And I think tokens as a form of ownership and seeing more examples there is much more of a novel idea and useful idea long term. So, and I'll give you an example. Let's say you're part of like a music group, and a music creator creates an album and they do an NFT drop. If you have some form of ownership in a fraction of that NFT, and you get royalties in perpetuity when that NFT gets successful, then you're sort of aligned with that success because you have invested in that. So I think those kinds of ownership mechanisms are really interesting to explore more into. But more short term, we're going to see more like weird and fun use cases where you'll see, okay, do this to earn X and do that to earn X, or spend it to like get an early access to this or tokenized access. I think those are some use cases that are, I'd say, more primitive and early.
Yeah. One example that comes to mind, just because you're referencing music, is, there's all these like SoundCloud artists that just throw shit online, and they hope to get some streams and listens and build an audience. And what if there was a way to kind of prove your early contribution as a fan by getting some form of participation NFT for saying I was within the first 1,000 listeners of this album. So imagine you could do that with any mainstream artist that's big today when they're just getting started, and play that ego card. So is that kind of like the utility that you're talking about, like creating proof of not necessarily ownership behind that, but proof of participation, proof of engagement? Is that what you're referring to?
Right. So I think every single interaction that you can map out on the internet, it has a value to it. And when you bring in tokens, you're essentially giving that sort of value and giving it more sort of significance and making it more profound. So in this specific example, let's say a music artist does an album and does it as an NFT and gives like fractional shares to people. Early adopters of that NFT, or like early adopters of like share owners of whoever contributed early on, they could split the revenue long term, and everybody gets like a transparent equal proportion of that NFT, or like make that situation reverse where people pull in some kind of ETH as a collateral and do it on a bonding curve, where long term, as and when it gets more successful, the price of it increases and ultimately benefits the community as a whole, which again falls under the umbrella of like how to build positive sum game mechanisms. So I think those kinds of use cases we'll see propagate like long term. But yeah.
So a lot of the main use cases that I see at the moment from social token communities is these Discord channels, and using tools like Collabland. And now you guys have something that you pushed out through Coinvise, right? That competes with Collabland to an extent, that allows for communities to create essentially tokenized communities and kind of like stake your time, your financial assets, beyond likes, clicks, subscribes, and shares to be more ingrained in a more intimate setting. But those are like the main use cases I see right now. Like you can't really reward people and automate the process for necessarily, let's say, listening to this podcast episode, right? Get contributed for listening, or get contributed for liking and proving that someone liked. Like where does that kind of come into play? And you guys trying to tackle those problems too?
Right. So I think, well, first of all, like I think Collabland like built a great product, and the whole point of like just different products in this space is like more towards eliminating competition than bringing competition. So I think that a lot of these tools, like more long term, are going to be ended up working together in some way, shape, or form than competing against. But I think, let's say if we're doing like something like a podcast or a stream, and how do you like sort of put value towards it, like more broadly speaking? And I think tokenized podcasts or tokenized audio rooms or any form of like interaction that we have is doable. Like NFTs are pretty restricted at this point to artwork and digital collectibles, but really what NFTs stand for is uniquely verifiable information. And I emphasize on the verifiability part because let's say we're doing this podcast and this is a form of content that you minted, or it's happening on chain and there's a copy of it that other people can verify that at this given time, this NFT or this podcast took place. You could pre-program it, like programmatically distribute shares or programmatically distribute ownership of this NFT to people. And then as and when you make revenue on this specific, I'm assuming in this particular case, you're making revenue in crypto. So since a lot of this is programmatic, as and when you make that revenue in crypto, it's automatically distributed to the people who initially contributed. And again, this is verifiable. So anybody can see an on-chain that, okay, this podcast or this form of content was minted as an NFT. So I think the whole point is like in Web2 spaces, you cannot really verify that. You cannot really put in value to that. But with crypto, you can there's a source of truth that you can point to. Okay, this happened.
Yeah. So from more of these like Web 2.0, 2.5 platforms, do you see them integrating social tokens and NFTs somehow into their infrastructure? And because they already built mass audiences and mass adoption, like Instagram first comes to mind, like, or TikTok. Do you imagine these platforms integrating these Web 3.0 tools to empower the creators?
I do think so. I think it's going to start off like much more in the sense that either they peg it to their own currency, or maybe start with ETH or something more mainstream that can cater to a larger audience. But I think that structure we're already seeing through microtransactions on every single platform. Even I think they're all doing with the fiat right now, but it's only a matter of time they're going to adopt it as crypto gets more mainstream and everybody starts to use it. So I think that's going to happen, but it's just gonna take. I can't put a timeline to it, but it's just gonna take a while to get there. I think more short term, what I see is that Web 2 and Web 3 platforms are gonna have to work together than separately.
Yeah, it's funny because now I read a rumor that Instagram is working on launching their own NFT platform to some extent, or integrating it somehow. I don't know the full details, but that comes shortly after a bunch of these new NFT platforms saying they're the Instagram killer, quote unquote, you know?
Yeah.
So once social tokens see more mass adoption and validation, I'm sure those conversations are probably going to take place if they're not already happening right now. But if a creator that's listening right now, okay, whether they be a TikTok creator, a YouTube creator, whatever they may be on any platform, how do they actually get started? Like where do they start looking for if they want to take their communities, quote unquote, public, or build tokens around them and create better incentivization structures to keep their audiences engaged? How do you get started?
Sure. So I think the easiest step to do is you can create like either a Discord or a Telegram server. I think a lot of these communities start there. You can you can just sign into Coinvise by just connecting your wallet, and you can create a token. Pretty easily. You can create it on a bonding curve, or you can create it on a fixed supply, and we have instructions on what that looks like. But creating a token is really simple on Coinvise, and if you want to build incentives around those tokens, like creating rewards, bounties, or doing tokenized access, or even do NFT as ownership, I think those kinds of tools comes integrated with that. And I think on top of that, if they want to extend that sort of community, they could even create a DAO and create a treasury by like getting started with a wallet that they can share with their core team. And I think DAO is also a great place to create a DAO if you're looking to create a DAO and sort of extend it more onto Web3. There's a service called Snapshot where you can do governance and do proposals, which is quite interesting. So you can slowly start to migrate all of these activities. But I think the first step could be really simple. Create a Discord, create an idea, have some people join in. And once you do have people join in, you can just go to Coinvise and quickly create a token and start messing around with incentives, like, set up a reward like, hey, join my Discord server for 50 tokens, or like, hey, join this event and earn 25 tokens, sort of scale like coordination, collaboration between these people. And once that's fun, you can sort of extend it to ownership, which is also an amazing thing.
So let's break this down. So come up with an idea, find a group of people, or at least more than one person, or at least two people that are excited about it, put them in a Discord, go to Coinvise, launch a token, create some form of formal documentation, like a one-sheeter of a white paper explaining the problem you're trying to solve, and then essentially mint tokens, create a snapshot so you can write proposals and vote on those proposals on the direction of the group, and then slowly get more people to join. That's what I'm kind of hearing from you.
Yeah, slowly get more people to join. I think one of the things that I tell everybody is like, have a clear use case of what your community looks like, and how you plan on like leveraging these tools to grow your community rather than reverse engineering it, like doing a token first and then reverse engineering somehow to like make it work. I think the right way to do it is first figure out the use case, see how that token can leverage. You can leverage that token to like scale collaboration, because that's what it does. It scales engagement, because when you have incentives for people to join or people to do anything for your community, and you have incentive to do that for them, I think that's like a mutually beneficial game. But like decide what that incentive is, and that could be as simple as join our Discord to like earn 50 tokens, or contribute on our GitHub on this source code, and if you do it correctly, earn 100 tokens. I think those kinds of use cases defined could be really helpful, and then see like how that could help, and then have like proposals and see how as a community you can make decisions on Snapshot. And once that's done, then you can slowly transition into a DAO.
Yeah. What are the more unique use cases you've seen kind of executed with social tokens, DAOs, and all the buzzwords we kind of mentioned, but mainly for like social tokens? What are the more unique use cases you've seen being implemented?
Sure. So as of today, we've seen obviously FWB, where initially they started pooling sort of these tokens and created a community where they could get access to a lot of these premium subscriptions. I think that was a pretty unique use case. One of the other use cases that we've seen, there's Forefront DAO and Forefront is community where they're sort of, and even Global Coin Research, where they're sort of trying to crowdsource content and like promote this idea of data mining or decentralized journalism, where if you're good at writing, if you do good research and analysis in the space, you can write an article for them and you can earn X amount of FF or GCR tokens. I think that was also a really interesting use case, because after that we saw a lot of people sort of started writing on that platform, and they started making more and more content. So it's not just one creator creating content, it's multiple creators at that point. And as a collective, they're creating content instead of just one person. So that was a really novel use case using those tokens. Then there were events. A lot of people were doing token-gated events, but I'm actually more interested in not limiting access, but increasing access.
Right.
So how do you have more people attend these events and collaborate so you can earn tokens by attending those events? So I think those are some use cases that we see primitively, but I'm more interested to see like how we could use NFTs as fractional ownership, or tokens as a means of ownership. You could, I mean, at some point you could even give salaries or stipends to your people and just have all of these activities on chain.
So just jumping back into Global Coin Research and Forefront. Okay, so Global Coin Research is one that you name dropped when we were having private conversations on how they're kind of using social tokens, but more in the form of a security, if I'm understanding correctly, to redistribute profits back to its contributors. Is that what you were referencing?
So it was a way to, well, they weren't doing it in terms of security. I think they were doing it in phases, where the initial phase was that if you write on their platform, you can earn X amount of these tokens. And they pull liquidity, so the token is worth something. Again, the token doesn't have to be worth something. It could be purely utility, as long as it does hold some value in it. But in that particular case, they did pull liquidity, and the token had some value. So whoever the contributor was can instantly swap it on Uniswap if they wanted to. So I think that was their phase one. I think their phase two is more like community owned, where ownership of GCR is getting more and more decentralized.
Yeah. Think about it for a minute. Users are becoming so powerful.
Yeah.
If there's all these communities incentivizing users' attention and collaboration, right, the user can start getting greedy with who they give their attention and collaborations to an extent. Like every community is paying them with tokens, rewarding them that they could easily cash out or swap, or depending on whatever the contracts are, right? But if users keep getting paid and incentivized and rewarded for participating in the communities that they love, do you think that these users, like now I'm like really thinking, right? Because obviously this is not happening right now. It's the other way around, where platforms are using users. Users are going to be using platforms. I feel like it's like an entire shift that's happening. Do you think we're going to get to a point where users are going to get super stingy with their time and their resources on who they contribute to and so on and so forth? You know what I mean?
Right. And again, we're going back to this idea of like bringing social with work together. Right. And you're doing sort of this gig economy where you're just tipped in these tokens, and you have like an entire portfolio of these either like valuable coins or invaluable coins that may or may not be worth something. So you're going to start to see like, okay, how do I segregate my time and use my skill set wisely to optimize for, just like doing the most amount of participation for the things that I value the most. And I think that's the distinction between like Web 2 or like the attention economy, and Web 3, which is sort of the ownership economy. And while like these sort of gig economy or like getting paid in crypto or a lot of these tokens are like primitive use cases, I think more long-term approach is going to be like something like what Gitcoin did when I was a Gitcoin user, and you could go claim on their website if you were a user for a Gitcoin for a while. And you could use that sort of ownership more so than participating on what the direction of that community is going to be. And based on your stake, that sort of direction matters, and you can sort of have that sort of say in where this project goes. So I think that's going to be much more fun long term. So if you're doing a lot of like attention to like maybe communities that don't matter to you, I think that wouldn't be as valuable, but we're going to start to see more time management there.
Yeah, and every day I hear more and more and more people betting on this greater vision where the
Right.
creator economy coincides with Web 3.0. How do you how does that kind of look like at Coinvise? How are you guys thinking about this? I know you guys are building tools and resources to empower these creators, but like what's the vision beyond that?
So we want a space where we can sort of also give this sort of idea of discoverability. So one of the things that Instagram or just Web2 platforms weren't able to give is that if I'm an Adam Levy fan, I'm not interacting with other fans that are out there. I'm not interacting with other, like, let's say, creators that are out there. Like, there's no communication between an Adam Levy fan and, let's say, a Terry Crews fan. What we're sort of also providing is that we're building a social experience where you just browse through a lot of these DAOs or creator communities and see what they're up to, and see if you can join them, and by joining those DAOs or community, if you can add value to them. And ultimately what we want to see is, like, let's say I as a user, I have some form of ownership in multiple DAOs, and DAOs really act as communities or like startups. So having that sort of ownership and just scrolling through Coinvise and see, let me see like what FWB is up to, let me see what GCR is up to, and just scroll through like what they're putting out as, let's say, rewards or incentives. It's great to explore those. So that's work for me, and it's a social experience because I get to be a part of these communities intimately and have ownership in them. So it's starting out with social tokens and NFTs, but the one thing that I say to everyone, it's going to look like a social network for DAOs, where people don't know it yet, but when you do a token and when you do an NFT and when you move slowly to on-chain activities, you're really acting as a DAO. So ultimately, as a community as a whole, we want to get to a place where we can be a DAO of other smaller DAOs. So that's the grand vision of Coinvise, where we can build like a social experience where you can explore all of these DAOs and be a part of them. If you have an idea yourself, quickly create a token, summon a DAO, have some interactions and incentives built around it, manage your treasury, and sort of build an experience where we merge this idea of social and work.
Yeah. And when I hear people talking about Web 3.0 and its merge with the creator economy, a lot of people tend to have conversations around the creators themselves. They don't really talk about the platforms and their users per se to an extent. I mean, there's talks about that, but I'm kind of coming to you from the point of view right now that users are building such data-rich profiles of themselves on the blockchain by participating in all these different DAOs and these communities and these organizations. That companies like Facebook, I imagine, might even be incentivizing users to use that data by paying them with their own native token to an extent. You know what I'm saying here? Like, I'm participating in this music DAO, but I'm also participating in this food DAO. I'm also participating in these organizations, these communities, and based off what the tokens that I hold, based off the interactions that I've had, you're essentially able to build, even though it's anonymous, you're able to build a profile of what this quote unquote individual looks like, that then platforms and companies can leverage for their own, I guess, benefit, right? And at the same time, use that data and incentivize users to allow them to use that data. Like, are these conversations you're seeing people have right now, or is that just too far of an advance in thinking?
Yeah, I think in terms of like privacy and having that sort of user data, a lot of the whole idea of like sort of pseudo anonymity is that I don't know Adam Levy. All I know is Adam.eat online. And whatever you portray your identity on, let's say, a social network that runs on Web3, the Coinvise, Showtime, or any other social network, I see that persona of you. Now that may or may not represent what the real you is in the real world. I don't even know what Adam Levy looks like. I don't even know what that person is. And even if that data is, sort of an accurate representation of what you are as a person or how you work, but your persona or your digital identity that you've created, where the only thing I know is your Ethereum address, and we sort of understand bytes and bits of these people, I think that's much more interesting to me. And I think that's the purest form of privacy, where you just disclose information that is required, enough to communicate with other people, but not enough for someone to manipulate you.
I'm thinking about this more from the perspective now. I'm a musician myself. I've been playing the drums for however long I can remember. And before I got into crypto, all I've been doing was music. And now that I'm seeing more of these artists get into the picture, that's what really excites me. And joining more DAOs that surround the musicians, the artists that I love most. Like, I can't wait till I don't know, Tame Impala releases a DAO and I could participate and contribute somehow and earn Paula tokens, but even from that point of view, and I don't know why I chose Tame Impala, right? But let's say Tame Impala has a DAO, there's a bunch of users in that DAO, assuming those users also participate in other DAOs and other organizations, Tame Impala could start leveraging that data to create more intimate experiences and cross-collaborate with other DAOs to create one big, whole, juicy community kind of thing. That overlaps with a bunch of different interests. It's so interesting how this will kind of play out. So let me ask you this: why is tokenizing more of like an emerging critical element for these individuals and communities? Like, I'm hearing more and more people talk about, we got to tokenize the world, and every single element of the world needs to be tokenized. Why is that such like a prevalent factor? I guess from a macro perspective of what's happening in the world.
Again, I mean, we attribute a lot of value to money, I think, and tokens are a way of representing value. So let's say you're forming a DAO with someone. Let's say it's a Tame Impala DAO, and they reach out to you, and then you guys form a DAO together and create a token. I think the token somehow represents a value, and I think that's what we've been attributed to. Like, if you date back to history, we started out with shells, there was barter system, and money sort of evolved into what we have fiat today. But that's sort of how we sort of structure even people socially, like even in the social hierarchy, we sort of see people inferior, superior, and that's how we associate power to. I think tokenizing what really does in Web3 is it decentralizes power in the sense that you sort of have control over your own economic structure instead of US dollar, where let's say 25% of the total supply was minted in the last 6 months. You have no control over that. You have no control over how those markets are regulated. Whereas if you do a token, you can sort of have access or have control over how you regulate it, create that economic structure that fits best on what your community's future lies, instead of like treating the entire world as one just community, or having these like smaller silos that can have like a token that serves that specific purpose. And then they could use something like Coinvise, where a lot of these DAOs can have inner communication and overlap where people can discover, and that sort of communication layer is built on top of it. But that's just how I see why tokenization has been an emerging trend, apart from just like gimmicky use cases that we've seen.
What's up, guys? Really quick, just want to shout out our amazing sponsors who are helping make Season 1 a reality. Season 1 welcomes Coinvise, where you can create a personal or community-owned social token on Ethereum. Coinvise also helps you create incentives through token rewards and bounties, NFT business models, and bot integrations for Discord. Go check them out at coinvise.co. Season 1 welcomes POAP, P-O-A-P, short for Proof of Attendance Protocol, which enables a novel way of creating one's life diary. Leveraging NFT tech, POAP facilitates an easy way to mint non-fungible tokens related to meaningful events. It's frequently used in crypto-native communities, and now it's starting to create NFT collectors in the mainstream too. They are hiring for roles like biz dev, key account management, and operations. You can apply by visiting adamlevy.io/POAP. That's P-O-A-P. All right, back to the episode. So I know you guys are working on a DAO project right now, a DAO product through Coinvise. Can you talk a little bit more about that?
Right. So it's less of a product, but more the idea that we want Coinvise to act like a DAO, and we want to build an ecosystem where a lot of these DAOs, or just a social network for DAOs, and simply put, or like a decentralized Reddit, where we're not really a centralized team building this. We want an entire community or that we've built to have access over it, and have a lot of these DAOs have some form of stake in what we're building, and vice versa. We want to work with a lot of these DAOs that are created on Coinvise and sort of continue to add value to them. So I think long term, what we're trying to see is Coinvise starting to turn as a DAO, which is what a lot of these companies that we're forming today in crypto are going to act as, launch our own token, and that leverage that token to incentivize more collaboration with a lot of these DAOs. So that's the idea with Coinvise. And like I said, ultimately, NFTs and social tokens have too much attention. I think they do hold like value, and they're sort of heart of what a DAO is. But ultimately, you want to be at a place where you make that interaction so seamless that you can summon a DAO, create a token, and have these interactions done seamlessly. So the learning curve on getting into Web3 is really short.
Yeah, it makes a lot of sense. And I'm thinking this more from the perspective of, okay, so let's say in the grand scheme of things, I don't know, let's say we have, give me an example of a top creator that like you guys want to work with or that you're working with right now.
I'll give you an example of someone we're working with right now. So Forefront is one of our really like favorite DAOs that just sort of built out, and it's one of our successful interactions, or more in terms of NFT. We worked with a comedian called Mark Norman, who did their NFT. But I think Forefront is one of the DAOs that are doing curation. So the first step was, again, tools. Then the second step was like Web3 networks. The third step was probably DAOs. But there's another layer where there's platforms like Yup or Forefront that are doing curation and talking about a lot of this next layer or next generation of like tokenization or Web3 protocols. And I think that's one of our favorite creators, because we try to invest in creators that are upcoming than someone who's already established. Want to work with people that are creating value and sort of have a lot of potential in the future. And Forefront is one of them that we truly see and work with. Does that answer your question?
So yeah, so if Justin Bieber came to you right now and said, "I want to start a DAO for him and his audience," so that would be a less attractive type of individual to work with. You guys want to work with more of these premature type of creators and build and grow with them.
I mean, it's not that Justin Bieber wouldn't be the ideal user. What we're trying to do is, the whole point of like leveraging crypto is to uplift and open access to people that otherwise did not have access to. It's like, we'd love to have Justin Bieber, but how do we create value for Justin Bieber? Like, Justin Bieber himself has quite a strong community, and I think that would translate very well on chain. But I think it's much more fun to work with creators that are up and coming and sort of uplift them and see how crypto can get them from 0 to 1 really quickly, rather than like getting taken down by Instagram, taking huge cuts, defeated by the algorithm. None of that.
So let's play on this a little bit more, because I think there's a distinction between a premature creator and an already established creator. And I think a misconception is that to have a successful social token DAO, you have to have some type of following. I don't think that's necessarily true, right?
That's great. No.
But these creators that are established, that have millions of followers, they're also to some extent a prime opportunity, because they're more Web 2.0, 2.5 native rather than 3.0 native, right? And it's more of empowering with these tools. Like, could you see that as a value within itself, rather than?
Absolutely.
Because like a lot of people are talking about mass adoption and blah, 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 right? All these buzzwords and energy that a lot of it is just conversations, but there's a lack of education, a lack of tools and resources to make it easier to onboard a non-crypto user and make them more crypto native. And I think that's a lot where the opportunity is too, like the network effect that can come with that, with adopting a new platform and educating an existing fan base of millions, right, on how to become more crypto. I think there's a lot of value in that. You don't think so?
100%. Yeah, 100%. And I think from that perspective, just looking at it, I think that's also like a really interesting way of looking at it, in the sense that if, let's say, we have a pretty established creator, I think that would create much more network effects. And we've been sort of pushing in both of those directions. I think it's been fun working with someone who's either a celebrity and has a huge audience, or someone who's up and coming, and then seeing them flourish and be successful. I think I mean, we do put a lot of emphasis on followers, but I think what's more important is how you engage with them and how you build a community around them. And if you do have that, I think then you can create a lot of more network effects than you would otherwise if it's just like a following where it's just one direction of value. Like, it should really be bi-directional, and crypto enables that. So how do we solve a problem for Justin Bieber and his community, right? And a lot of times when you see these creators on stage, they say that I am who I am because of my fans.
Yeah.
And deep down, they also know that without those fans, they'd be nothing. So
100%.
I do think that this could be really useful, like in just like specific terms of Coinvise, it could be useful to these established creators, but also like from a just grand scheme of things, looking at it from a higher level, I think we'll see a lot more. Like, I think UFC did a token recently on socios, and we've already seen like a lot of these bigger companies or individuals or celebrities do their own token and launch them and have successful interactions around them. I think that's going to create a lot of, early days of YouTube back in 2008, 2009, it was like that. Like, there were a few people creating, and then that caused those network effects. And today, everybody wants to be a YouTuber.
But now everybody wants to be a YouTuber, and YouTube is screwing their creators and freaking taking away a majority of their payments and their whatever that comes with that. But yeah, crazy. And I think that's the problem that social tokens are trying to solve to an extent, is creating better monetization schemes for these creators that are getting basically fucked by these platforms while they're building an amazing audience, and those platforms have provided them with tools to gain those followers and those fans. They do a shitty job with helping them monetize them. And I think that's the beauty behind what we're about to experience. But I brought this up earlier, the misconceptions behind social tokens, because all this stuff is super fresh and quite frankly, very overwhelming to someone who may not be as crypto native. What have you seen some of the misconceptions being around social tokens? And I guess people like wanting to get started. Like, what are some that you've seen?
It's people's speculation, making it all about prices. I think when you see things like tokens, when the core aspect of it is either to scale collaboration and coordination and sort of represent ownership, and you sort of try to map that to financial value and try to speculate on it, I think that's something that gets skewed down the line. And not to mention, a lot of these communities down the line are going to be their own sort of cities or silos or even billion-dollar like DAOs, and that's awesome. But I just think that just looking at it from like this monotonous lens of just price and discovery, I think that's something that is a misconception. I think it's much more than, we've seen a lot of good implementation of DAOs that don't actually have a value at all. Like, they don't have a US dollar value, or they're not sort of created a pair with ETH. They're just their own token, and the value is that it creates scarcity or some kind of thing that it filters out. So that's a huge misconception that I'd like to solve. And the second is that meme coins and shit coins. I think that's been sort of the narrative in the past few months. And yes, we're going to see a lot of those shit coins and meme coins being made, but I think that's not the whole picture, though. Like, people, whenever you talk about social tokens, people generally attribute it to meme coins or shit coins. But as we see more like successful DAOs or tokens being created and interactions around them, that narrative is going to change. But I think the biggest misconception is just it maps to this, and that's not the whole picture. So I'd probably say those are the two things that maybe focus too much on.
Let's dive deeper into the first one really quick, because I think that's what attracts users in the beginning, because they see a number on the screen that fluctuates, that's tied to their brand and their community. But how does a token's value get, I guess, issued and placed at launch? Like, why do some tokens trade at 20 cents or 2 cents a token, or others trade at like $1 to $2, $3 at their genesis? Like, where does that come from? How do people determine that? Because I'm sure that's a lot of, like, one of the major questions these people are like thinking about. Like, how are you just creating value out of thin air?
Right. So typically what uh, what happens is when you do create a token, to give it some kind of value, you can go to something like Uniswap or QuickSwap if you're on a different chain, or Banker or Balancer, or any sort of automated market maker where you can seed it with some capital, and that sort of capital determines the value of a token. If it's minted on a Barney curve, so Barney curve itself acts as its own automated market maker. So if you pool some liquidity and create a pair with ETH or put ETH as collateral, that creates some seed value of that token itself. And then going forward from that, how Uniswap prices its tokens based on like the supply and demand of that token itself, how it's traded long term, the value of it gets determined, and that sort of makes the difference of it being at $1 or $10. And it's not necessary that the token creator has to list the token on one of these exchanges and start trading it. Anybody can do it for that matter, and they can list a token and seed it with some capital. And that capital also, like, you decide if you want to, put 0.1 ETH for 110 ETH or whatever that capital is and create a pair. But generally, if you want to seed it with some value, you can do it on Uniswap, which is probably one of the most used platforms today, where you can put some kind of ETH and create a pair with a particular ERC20 token or a social token. And that means something called liquidity tokens. And again, going back to investing, you can also have LPs, and LPs get 0.3% of every transaction if they've like invested in the liquidity pool initially. So there's some incentive there. But that's how sort of automated market makers work.
Yeah.
That's what gives it value.
Got you. So when people are creating, or when creators are initially building and strategizing the launch of their token, what kind of factors do you guys use to guide these individuals who, let's say, are brand new to the space, to determine their launch based off a bonding curve or more of a traditional linear curve?
So on Coinvise, there's typically two options. Like starting from the beginning, when you create a token, you can either create it as a scarce asset on a fixed supply, which is 10 million tokens, which is pretty conventional, and then on a bonding curve, which is something that we're trying to recommend and more when we're sort of like when you're sort of trying to act as a DAO. And in perpetuity, you don't want to really cap those tokens at 10 million. You can create more liquidity and at the time, and then even when you do have that bonding curve done, you can like change the slope and adjust it over time, which is really cool if you think about it. So that's an idea that we just introduced very recently. But to answer your question,
can you repeat that last part? It cut out for a minute. You said, so when you're let's say you're minting at 10 million tokens, you were talking about.
So either you can do it on a fixed supply, which is 10 million. Or something that we recommend highly to most people that we work with, which we recently introduced, was a bonding curve, where you can sort of adjust. So the way bonding curves, like put simply, work is that as the distribution grows, or as the token is distributed more, the price of it increases over time. And you define the function in that. So you can sort of define the function in a way where it goes linearly, or in a sigmoid function, or logarithmically. So I think that's going to be much more interesting, because then you can create the token that fits much more like your use case than just having one size fits all. Like so far, we've seen only like fixed supply use cases where it just does 10 million tokens. I think it's going to be really interesting when people start minting tokens on a bonding curve. And the way it works is that when you do have a bonding curve, you can select how much capital you want to seed it with. So let's say you can do 0.1 ETH, and then you can mint those tokens, and that's going to seed it with some value, which sort of acts as its own automated market maker. And then going forward, you can adjust it. So now it's not growing linearly. You can do it in a sigmoid function, which is really cool, because that really fits with like specific use cases.
Yeah, there's so many, and this is why I feel like it's such a great opportunity for creators and for individuals, communities to jump on board and to tokenize their communities. But while the tools and the process, you guys make it super easy. You just go on Coinvise, you can mint tokens instantly.
Right.
It's still a lot of process and thinking and strategizing on how to utilize that token, what the dynamic and the I guess the economics behind that token should kind of be. And yeah, it's interesting to see how this will kind of play out down the line.
Yeah, I think, one of the things that it does is like it lowers the barrier of entry. And like one of the things that as a team at Coinvise we're trying to do is like create more discovery for a lot of these successful creators that created their tokens. So if you're someone who's maybe clueless about how you want to do this process, or it seems intimidating at first, you can just explore a lot of these people that created their own token and see how they're using it and how they're utilizing it. You can just, it's pretty transparent. You can just scroll through a list of rewards or scroll through people that created their own token and just explore through like really fun, weird, or useful use cases. And I think the second thing was that how do you get that initial like, so some of the novel ideas that was either setting up rewards or bounties, but the second was again ownership. And to get to a point where you can do all of that, I think crowdfunding or investment in public goods was something that we're trying to push for. And I think that's something that we're trying to bring to Coinvise in the next few weeks, is that we want to be able to have these communities crowdfund easily from their community, either through straight staking or NFT fractionalization. And I think that's a really novel concept that plays into this idea of you can either invest into the community that you find it successful, and going forward you can get paid either in royalties and perpetuity, or you can earn or you can essentially own a percentage of it. So I think crowdfunding is going to help a lot of these creators get started and get those funds to kickstart their career. Whereas in Web2, that's something that's very difficult to do. Like, how do you get funds and how do you raise funds from institutional VCs?
Yeah, no, that makes a lot of sense. I'm excited to see how this kind of plays out, and the level of experimentation between bonding curves and token supplies. And I'd be curious to see like how more of these mainstream creators, individuals, communities, however we want to call them. I feel like there's so many terms. Utilize this to empower their fans, empower their audience, and do so in a way where, on one end of the spectrum, because there's two users to this, right? There's the investors who are going to be speculating on the token price and trading these creator communities, right? And then there's the fans who are actually going to be buying into this stuff and leveraging its utility for what it has to offer, right? And while a lot of creators are treating this from the membership, loyalty, and rewards point of view of access, right? On the other side, you have the people who are going to be basically trading these people like a human stock market, a community stock market to an extent, right? I'm like thinking Black Mirror right now, okay?
Right.
Is it ethical?
Right.
Is it ethical? Like you can't ditch that point of view of experimenting with social tokens and all that stuff, right? Do you think that's ethical? How do you think people will kind of respond to that down the line?
So just coming to the point in terms of investing, it's either you can bet on institutions or you can bet on individuals. And I'd rather bet on someone like, let's say Elon Musk, right? For an example, just out of the blue, I'm just picking one name. And what if I could just bet on like whatever this guy does? And I think a great example of that is Alex Masmich. When he did his token, people were just betting on his career and his success going forward, and they got like basically a say in what he's going to do next. And that was like a really fun experiment, which was like more like a human ICO. And I think that thought, like, it seems dystopian, but it's not really as dystopian, because we've seen a lot of people do it. And like I said in the beginning, a lot of these DAOs or individuals act like companies, where they have people helping them. They have they're creating some value on the internet. And what they really are is they're acting like startups or companies that in their very early stages, and it's completely okay to have their own token and sort of, regulate it, as long as it's done properly, as long as it's done in a way where you can create positive sum games. Like, one of the misconceptions that I've been trying to solve is that it's one of the use cases or utility that I've seen that shouldn't be promoted as much is gated access. Like, it's not really about gating access, it's about opening access. Like, it should be the reverse, where you shouldn't pay to attend an event. Like, I can already do that with fiat, but with crypto, I should get paid to attend an event. And there's a great service called Kickback that already does that. And if you don't attend one, it sort of splits the revenue with all the people who attended, actually, which is really cool. So I think a lot of those kinds of use cases or utility that we're going to see on Coinvise are going to be really interesting to see going forward. But I don't think that's very dystopian, that individuals are going to act like companies or startups or even DAOs.
So you think that all these token-based Discord channels, they're actually doing it wrong to an extent, depending on their use case. Obviously, Friends with Benefits is a unique community, but like if these
They're not doing it
musicians,
wrong.
actors, go
I
ahead.
don't think they're doing it wrong, but it's not really like you could do the same thing with fiat, or like how are you using crypto to create like a positive sum game or mutually beneficial game, right? Like the core idea, like remember, how do both parties win? Like how does everyone sort of get transparent, truthfully, like equal access and freedom, right? And if you're sort of getting access, you can already do that, by the way, with OnlyFans and like other like similar platforms where it's not really hard to do. Like we've seen subscription models, like what they really are is just filter mechanisms, and that's what gated access is. So it's not really a wrong approach. It's just not a unique approach that, or like you're not just using crypto to leverage something even more powerful. So I think using crypto to increase access or increase collaboration is what I'm interested in. And while we still provide that sort of feature, but I think I'm more interested in seeing that over gating access.
Interesting. Yeah, that's a good perspective to have, because a lot of these communities that I've seen come into play, they have their Discord channels, and I keep referencing Discord because it's the more plausible use case that I've kind of seen come to life. And they limit interaction and create exclusivity and FOMO by creating these token gated experiences. And I think if you're trying to create a new type of fan base and target your more hardcore fans, where you can provide them a financial stake in what you're doing, I think both can exist in a creator's community. I think there could be the token gated experience, and I think there could be the very open and loose and flexible type of thank you for coming, here is an airdrop type of experience.
Essentially it's like what you're looking for. Are you looking, let's say, if to give like a specific example, are you looking to grow your community? Like how are you incentivizing collaboration, right? Like how are you like making that engagement go from like 100 people doing something for you and you doing something for them to 1,000 people working together? Do you think gating access is the best way to get to 1,000 people?
No.
Or do you think like increasing access is the best way to get 1,000 people? And let's like be specific. Like Adam has a really novel idea that helps a lot of people. How does he get to 1,000 people faster, getting access or increasing it? So I think we're going to see a lot of that, and while like, both of them can coexist, and we're going to like really successful interactions like FWB, and it's always nice to see those. But I think like 6 months from now, you're going to see like a lot more like investment in public goods kind of like novel ideas where it sort of opens up access and everything is transparent, no FOMO, get in right away, and come join us.
But then if it's easy to join and there is no FOMO, then will people want it? Because if everyone can get it and there's no exclusivity to it and there's no quote unquote scarcity, will it make it appealing for people? And now we're just talking general sense, right? We're talking strategy. You know what I mean?
Right. So I think, so we can talk about FOMO. FOMO can be like, you can still do FOMO and keep it relatively open. So let's say I joined a community and it was like fairly easy to join. Like there was no barrier to access, right? Like there was no like, you need to have X amount of tokens in your wallet to join this community. Like none of that. I joined it pretty easily. I think there could be FOMO on interaction. Like, and I keep going back to Gitcoin is because Gitcoin, the way it works is that like let's say I could do a bounty or reward for doing kind of some work. I can apply for it, and then multiple people can apply for it, and only one of them gets selected. Whoever is the best skilled at it.
Sure.
So you could still have FOMO, but FOMO on interaction. FOMO not in like access. So
makes
that
sense.
could be fun.
Yeah, makes a lot of sense. Okay, final question. Okay, so I want to talk to you about the stages of the internet's development. Okay, so we had Web 1.0, which was very read-only type of experience. That transitioned and got eaten alive by Web 2.0, where we got really beautiful interfaces. We were able to create online communities, social interactions. We had these Web 2.5 platforms like YouTube, Facebook, Instagram, Snapchat, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera.
Right.
And now we're transitioning into Web 3.0, okay? And it's building on top of the primitives of Web 2.5. What do you think is going to, one, eat Web 3.0 alive, just like Web 2.0, 8, 1.0, right? And then what might be its downfall, if any?
I think so just taking a more philosophical approach here. The IQ to destroy the world decreases by a point every year. And what Web3 does is democratizes access, but it also democratizes destruction. So when everybody has equal power or somewhat of a power or stake, it makes it easy to destroy it. So I think it's sort of like a double-edged sword when something is so powerful. And I think when you're democratizing this, I think destruction is also like one thing that, and we've already seen it. Like if you've seen a lot of these exploits, where a lot of these protocols have been exploited programmatically by a lot of these hackers that have figured out some more vulnerability, where they either like sort of exploit a protocol or even have more centralized access to it, in the sense that they somehow find a way to get more stake into the game or more skin in the game and make it more like a centralized game instead of a decentralized game. I think those are some pitfalls that could take it down. But ultimately, I'm optimistic that the space, or like Web3 as overall, is going to survive, because just going back to like the genesis of crypto, Byzantine fault tolerance, where you assume that a set of people are going to act irrationally, and but there's going to be more people, and based on the mechanisms that we build, we can incentivize good behavior over bad behavior. And what my professor likes to always say is, you want to create a mechanism where make it more profitable to be a good actor than a bad actor. So I think overall, like long term, I'm more optimistic. But as soon as we design like the right incentives, like Adam is more incentivized to perform like a good actor because that's more profitable, then become a bad actor because then you gain nothing from that. I think that's like good design. And as long as we design those kinds of protocol really secure, I think we have a good future.
It's a good way to end off. Jenil, you're the man. Thank you for being on. You're so sharp and so insightful. I really hope to have you on again soon. Thanks for being here.
Really appreciate it, brother.